Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cronin's Corner. I'm pleased to be joined today with Chief Ernie Martineau, Chief of the Fitchburg Police Department. Chief, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thank you for the invite, Senator.
I'm going to get right into it. No softballs today. We're going to get right into the hard-hitting stuff.
Outstanding.
Do you have a prediction for the Thanksgiving football game, Fitchburg-Leominster?
Come on, Senator.
I just want to know the score. Do you have a prediction for the score?
Fitchburg on top.
It should be a good
It
game.
doesn't end up always that way, but as a lifelong Red Raider, you're always rooting for my hometown. I played for Fitchburg High for 3 years.
How'd you guys do when you were there? I don't know the answer to this question. So
we lost all 3 years. My sophomore year was a blowout. My junior year was a very close game. Actually, we were winning going into halftime. It's funny, you won't forget, as a young man playing for Fitchburg High, you will never forget your games.
Right.
And I can remember them like they were yesterday. The junior year, we were winning going into halftime, and Leominster just was stronger, and they came out and dominated in the second half. And then my senior year at Crocker Field, every senior looks forward to playing on Crocker Field, and yeah, we got killed. And I've made a lot of friends, and we still stay in touch, and we still look forward, and I have as many friends from Leominster now, and it's still that competitive edge, but we respect each other. And it's great conversations throughout your life.
And the game's at Crocker Field this year too, right?
Is.
No, it's exciting.
Yeah.
My best memories. I mean, since I was a kid, my dad took me to the game, and as a kid, you just dream about being on that field.
You do.
Unfortunately for me, I grew up in Lunenburg, so I was SOL, as they say.
Yes.
But
we won't hold that against you, Senator.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I think there's so many issues that come across your desk and that the department faces and leads on in the community.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into some of those things, can you just give us a background on your career? You joined the force in 1987. And
I did.
Did you think you were going to be chief when you joined in '87?
No clue. I knew from a long time ago that I wanted to be a Fitchburg police officer. I'll share a quick story. At B.F. Brown, where I went to junior high school, at one of our dances, I was the council president, and it was my job to organize dances. And I was talking to the detail police officer that was working the dance that night. His name was Peter Roddy, and I'm having a conversation with him, and I told him, sir, someday I'm going to be just like you. And I forgot about that conversation until years later, when then Chief Peter Roddy came up to me and said, do you remember that conversation we had back in 1978?
No kidding.
And how the irony behind it.
Yeah.
I made a comment that I want to be a police officer, but I want to be just like you. He goes on and has a long storied career as the chief in Leominster, and it's ironic how our paths have married each other over the years. So it's kind of a neat story. But
that's remarkable.
Yeah. I joined the police department in 1987. I lived in Fitchburg my entire life. Like I said, educated through the Fitchburg public school system. Went on to Norwich University in Northfield, Vermont. Went up there for 4 years and graduated with a criminal justice degree. And fortunately, I took the police exam right away back in 1986. And when I graduated, I got the call from then Chief Gallant, and who offered me a position with the Fitchburg Police Department. And it was the greatest decision of my life, because I went back and forth. I had the opportunities to go up to New Hampshire as a state trooper, and I remember pondering that at the kitchen table with my mother.
Was that more money then?
It was less money.
It was less money?
Yeah. So it was a double factor. I could work in my hometown, but make more money as well. So I remember pondering that decision with my mother at the kitchen table, and collectively, the two of us, she said, your heart's here in the city. She knew I was a Red Raider, and now I'd be a Fitchburg police officer. And that's when my career began. And it's been quite the ride as a Fitchburg police officer, now going on 34 years. The first 10 years I worked in the patrol division. Wasn't sure I wanted to take any supervision, any rank, my first 10 years on the job. And then in 1996, I decided to take my first promotional exam. And from there, and then I started rising through the ranks. I've worked every position in the police department, from community policing to patrol division to the narcotic unit to the drug unit.
Yep.
And then I ended, before I became chief, I was running our detective bureau, managing the entire detective operations of the PD.
What's the job you've enjoyed the most in the department?
My time in the detective bureau.
Yeah.
It really, you work so closely with the district attorney's office, and I made so many great friends and partners through my my tenure as the leader of the detective unit. I really enjoyed those years because you see your outcomes. You're dealing with victims of crime, sometimes some of the most horrific crimes.
Yeah.
And you get so closely involved in those cases. And when you have a final outcome where justice has been served and you can provide someone of a victim of a crime with some relief, there's nothing more rewarding than that.
It'd be incredibly gratifying.
It really
see
was.
It. Yeah.
And that was a point in my career where I struggled to, I want to make the transition from a worker in charge of a detective unit to the position of managing budgets, managing personnel, being the face of the police department. You know, thought about it, and once again, I think I made the best
right
move possible.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been chief of police since January 2015. I'm starting my 8th year as chief in this city, and I have no regrets. And quite frankly, I work with some of the finest men and women in law enforcement you could ever ask for. So that makes my job that much more easy.
How's the composition of the police department changed since you joined too? I remember I saw there's a post that went viral on Facebook. Everybody out on patrol in the city of Fitchburg was a female.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool and pretty remarkable.
You know, I'm very proud of our diverse makeup at the police department. In fact, the Fitchburg Police Department per capita, we're the 5th richly diverse agency in the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
That says a lot about our community. It hasn't always been that way. When I came on, one of my academy mates, Linda Swears, she was the first female police officer to join the ranks of the police department. And in '87, our diversity makeup was very slim. Very few officers of color, very few Latino officers.
Yeah.
The makeup wasn't there. It wasn't reflective of the city because in '86, we still had a very richly diverse city.
Right.
It wasn't reflective. And things slowly changed over time. And, you know, that became a priority of mine in 2015 when I took over the department. It's important that your department is a mirror of the community that you serve. You know, and one of the first things I started was a community engagement unit to really sell the Fitchburg Police Department, bring the Fitchburg Police Department out to the community. And I think that paid dividends in the last 7 years, because if you look at who we're attracting to take the civil service test, they're examples of who our community is, the makeup of our community.
And if you're serious about community policing, you need to reflect the people you serve.
You absolutely do. You sure do. You know, we've been very successful. I can't take all the credit. My predecessor, Bob Demore, and before him, you know, we had Charlie Tasker. We had some exceptional chiefs over the years. Eddie Cronin, Eddie Cronin was way ahead of his years as a progressive chief. So we've slowly moved in that direction, and I'm proud to say today we have an extremely diverse department. We're about a 34% ratio in diversity. We just, yeah, it's really.
It's something that the department and the city is really leading on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So to pivot a little bit here, I know last month we were at a couple of events together for Overdose Awareness Month, and I went to one event in Gardner where they had a slideshow of everybody really from the region who we'd lost, and it was a reminder to me of how hard my generation specifically has been hit by opioids. And you know, there were a lot of kids I played Little League with, kids I was in school with. And we're still in the thralls of this epidemic, and you know, we're still losing far too many people to opioids, to fentanyl. We've had a lot of good conversations about how you as the chief have to balance compassion and empathy with also kicking down doors and making sure that the people who are putting fentanyl in these drugs that are killing people on the streets, bringing them to justice. Can you talk about just what you view as the biggest challenges in terms of this epidemic right now and how the department is responding? Yeah,
you know, this is a topic we could probably talk about on 3 different shows. The opioid epidemic came on to us like a freight train. It hit us hard. It came on that quickly. If you look back in time when it actually started making that swing, and it was around 2013, 2014 that, you know, that surge. And I look back in 2010 to 2013, I was running our drug unit here in the city. And, you know, we were attacking it in a different approach. We were very, very proactive. But if you look at the drugs that we were taking off the streets, the dealers that we were targeting, it was much different than what we're dealing with now, much harder than what we're dealing with now. And then, you know, in 2015 when I took on as chief, I knew that we had a significant problem, and continue doing what we were doing wasn't going to be acceptable. And there was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of talk around substance use disorders. We've called it many different things. The term substance use disorder has now finally taken hold, and it seems to be that's the proper terminology for people suffering from a medical condition.
Yeah.
And you know, back in 2015, you know, I thought the most important thing we could do right out of the gate, something we could do internally, was to try to erase the stigma around addiction. You know, for far too often, you know, people that suffering from addiction, they referred to
Junkies thrown away,
just, you know,
right?
You know, people that you don't want to deal with. You know, just look the other way, and you know, they're not savable. You know, but we learned very quickly that that junkie, that person we're throwing away, could be your brother, could be your father, could be your mother.
It affects every family.
It affects everybody. I think it's fair to say you can't ask one person that hasn't been touched by the opiate epidemic. They know someone in their life that is either suffering from substance use disorder or has lost their life to it. So immediately I knew that we had to change the image and change our perception and get rid of that stigma. So that's a big task on law enforcement, because when law enforcement, you're being called to see the worst in the worst of times.
And cultures change slowly, right?
They do,
They don't
especially
change
in
overnight.
my world.
Right.
They do change slowly. So you know, I made it a point, and you're told to lead from the top and lead by example. And everywhere I went, everywhere I spoke, I tried to hammer home that perception, and getting rid of the stigma was my #1 priority. And I thought we were very successful in that first year between 2015 and 2016. But just getting rid of stigma is not going to correct the problem. Right. You need many more tools. You need many more options. You know, and I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some great teams. Collaborated with the district attorney's office. We have some exceptional people here in the city that are committed to working and solving the opiate problem, solving addiction problems. But we're still light years away. And you know, and we've spoke at different other circles. Policing's changed on how we respond to these types of issues. You know, you look back 30 years ago, this wasn't even in the vocabulary of a young police officer in 1987.
Right.
Wasn't in our vocabulary.
And we talk about that in our office too, how police are really have become the first line of defense to each of society's ills. And I don't care if it's homelessness, substance use disorder, domestic violence, crime of any sort. How are the challenges that Fitchburg and the region face today different than when you started in 1987?
Sure. You know, selfishly.
Or are they the same?
No, they've changed.
Yeah.
And selfishly, as a lifelong career law enforcement officer, I'm going to say, quite frankly, it's not fair. There's been a lot of burdens put on the shoulders of men and women wearing police uniform.
Right.
Our motto is to protect and serve. However, protecting and serving has taken on a different language in the last 10, 15 years. For example, Section 12, that's an involuntary commitment to a hospital for a mental health condition. Section 12s were around in 1987 when I was a brand new police officer. It was this pink slip. They were called pink slips because the paper was pink. They were in the glove box of every cruiser. I knew they were there. At some point in the police academy in 1986, we were told how to fill out a Section 12. But I can tell you that my first 10 years, the glove box never was opened, and the pink slips came out maybe once a year. Today, because we're asked to do so much more as it relates to mental health, we're doing Section 12s, and they're no longer pink slips, but us older cops still call them pink slips.
Yep.
We're doing them every day. I mean, it's that frequent that, you know, a police officer will do a Section 12 almost every shift or every other shift. I mean, they're that frequent. So, you know, we've segued into that type of realm, and, you know, quite frankly, we're trained as law enforcement. We're not trained as
You're not
clinicians.
mental health
We're not
clinicians.
mental health clinicians.
Right.
But that changed the dialogue in police training. And now in police training, we're looking at different avenues. We're looking at different perspectives, and we're training our men and women in a different manner.
I think that's a good segue. Can we talk about the co-responder model that is your vision for the department, and how to get at you know, really this behavioral health crisis that we all know exists?
To that question, I'm going to back up just a little bit and tell you how we got to the point of this co-responder model that is now running across this nation in every police agency. That's the topic of today on how to respond to a whole host of societal issues. About 4 years ago, there was a challenge put out by the International Chiefs of the Police Association. It was called the One Mind Campaign. And the One Mind Campaign centered around mental health response, response to social issues. And there's a level of training in the police world, it's called crisis intervention. And the IACP put out a challenge for all police agencies to get to a level of training for their membership that at least 30 to 40% of their department had the advanced training in crisis intervention. Mm-hmm. Now this started before I became chief, and then I doubled down on it when I became the chief, and I saw the importance behind this model of policing known as crisis intervention. And the Fitchburg Police Department received an award from the International Chiefs of the Police Association. We were the 5th department in the state to get full accreditation from IACP and recognized as a crisis intervention police department where we met all the requirements under the One Mind campaign. And fast forward that, so now my police department, about 40 to 50% of my agency is now had the advanced training in crisis intervention.
Right.
Take that one step further, and I said this just a few minutes ago, police officers, we're law enforcement, we're not clinical support. In crisis intervention, you need that clinical support. So currently what we're doing in the city, my crisis intervention team, we review any report that has a mental health crisis in it, a substance use disorder, anything to do with a social problem that's going on in a person's life. The crisis team then evaluates those, and we do follow-up visits twice a week that people that have been in some type of crisis. But when we go out, we're doing follow-ups with clinical support, with master-level clinicians. It's a very expensive adventure. Our crisis team has been very fortunate to get grant funding through the federal government, and here's a great opportunity to say thank you to you. I spoke to you at the beginning of your term as senator, and you asked me what my needs were. I need full-time clinical support, and thank you for the earmark you were able to secure for me for the city of Fitchburg to bring in clinical support. And I would expect next year, early January, the Fitchburg Police Department will have a full-time clinical support person right embedded in the police department that is available to respond to crises in real time. So the co-responder model that you just mentioned, it's a combination of law enforcement working side by side with clinical support in the police car, in the field, responding to real-life crises in the moment. So when we're rolling up on a call, whether it's anywhere in the city, and someone is having a mental health crisis or they're in a overdose situation, we're going to be rolling up with clinical support combined with law enforcement, and our toolboxes are open.
Right.
We can send them, we can make referrals to Recovery Centers of America. We can use our clinical support at Community Health Link. We can utilize Health Alliance Hospital. We can utilize a whole bunch of tools that are within our toolbox. So now we've just expanded our capabilities from just law enforcement to the mental health profession and the clinical support, and our toolbox is now wide open. So it has a promising outcome to it, and I'm really excited about what 2022 will bring in this type of response.
And I feel like we're at the beginning of this work too. I think that the problem has grown substantially, certainly since the onset of the pandemic, certainly since your career began. But can you talk about also the appreciable difference that I would say that the professional development of police officers and just the awareness of a mental health call and responding to somebody in a crisis is made. I know we had a conversation, I think when I was running as a candidate, just about how the number of arrests have dropped so dramatically in Fitchburg, and how you correlated that to de-escalation training and just officers with an awareness that, you know, hey, a form tackle isn't going to solve this situation.
Right. Yeah, and as I said earlier, the police department makeup right now, we're about 40% of our membership has now had that advanced training in crisis intervention. Crisis intervention is a wide range of skill sets, and it starts with de-escalation, knowing what tools you have, knowing how you can offer services, but more importantly, it teaches you how to talk to people. And if you look at statistical data, which I think is sometimes very telling of an agency, of a community, if you look at our statistical data, two things jumped off, because each year I prepare annual reports. And there was two things that, not this year, but last year, really jumped off the pages at me as far as statistical data. Number one was the number of arrests. Typically in the city of Fitchburg, if you look at a 10-year average, we would be averaging anywhere from 1,500 to maybe 1,800 arrests per year. If you look at the last 3 years, our arrest numbers have gone from 1,500 down to 1,200, down to 900, down to 800. So I asked myself, why is that number going backwards? Is it my officers are doing less work? I don't think so, because the call volume has stayed consistent.
It's there, right?
The call volume's consistent. We respond to about 50 to 60,000 calls a year for service. That hasn't changed. Okay, have we hired more people? No, we've been pretty steady on how many people we employed. So I looked at other factors to try to understand why my arrest numbers are going on, and I can only go back to one area. We're training our police officers now to talk to people, to look for other alternatives, because it was very easy to just take your handcuffs out, throw them on you, put them in a cell, bring them over to the Fitchburg District Court.
Move along, right.
And let the judicial system take care of the problem. Now in our training, you're looking for different options. You know, you have another tool just besides that handcuff. You know, the greatest tool that any police officer has is what comes out of their mouth, how they verbalize. And that skill set has resulted in less arrests, less incidences where my officers are going hands-on with someone that's in crisis. You talk them down, you show them respect, you show them a little bit of dignity, and most times you can resolve it. Now, there's other times you can't resolve it.
Absolutely.
We have to go hands-on. Law enforcement, it's a dangerous job. Sometimes we do have to go hands-on. However, we've given them that tool that there's other options than just putting cuffs on someone. And the other statistic that really jumped out at me was complaints against police officers. We would average anywhere from 20 to 25 official IA investigations a year. That dropped almost 50%, down to 12, 14, you know, a little bit more one year, but the number of complaints against police officers dropped. That's a telltale sign that my officers are showing compassion.
The interactions are different.
The interactions are different. They're less controversial, and they're more helpful. So, you know, a lot has come out of training, and we're finally at a point now where, through legislation, training has changed drastically in the state of Massachusetts. And before we came on air, we were talking about training. You know, and training was lacking significantly 10 years ago. Yeah. And that whole thing has changed now differently. Now, with the creation of the Police Officers Standing Commission, through the legislation last year, through the governor's legislation in January, there's been a strong emphasis on transparency and training for law enforcement. So, you know, I think we're coming full circle, and you may have heard me use this term before. We're starting to reimagine policing. As
you reimagine policing, and as 2022 is going to be your 35th year in the department.
Yes, it is.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've been the chief for a number of years. Where would you like to take the department in the future, and what's your vision for reimagining policing here in Fitchburg?
That's a great question. I think one thing hasn't changed. We still have to protect, and we still have to serve. That has been a common theme since the beginning of time, since Sir Robert Peel termed that the police are the public and the public are the police. We have a duty and a commitment to the people that live, work, and visit the city of Fitchburg. However, that being said, our job has changed drastically. Our job has changed where now we have to find other ways to provide services, whether it's someone suffering from a mental health issue or someone suffering from an addiction issue. You know, we're taking greater roles, working with the children of our community. I'd like my vision when I'm no longer chief and hopefully I'm enjoying a long retirement, is that the department continues in this fashion, continues to see them being part of the community. The worst thing that you can have is a police agency that's apart from the community. Your agency has to be part of the community. And I think the big step was creating a very robust community engagement unit within
Yeah.
the police department.
Yep.
And I have to give kudos to my lieutenant, Jeff Howe, that runs that unit. You know, it's so important that we're seen in the
Officers
community.
are at middle school dances and seen as right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at some point I would hope, you know, a police officer working a dance says the same thing that Peter Roddy said to me 37 years ago. You know, and I think the future in policing is really going to come down to compassion, but strong compassion where we'll still have a duty to protect the citizens, because make no mistake about it, Senator, there's going to always be evil in this world. And with evil, there has to be a combative force of a professional law enforcement agency that can combat it and protect the average citizen from any type of harm.
And so we've got time for one more question, but what are ways that members of our community, that local officials, state officials can support the police department moving forward?
You know, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of support from the current administration here, city councilors through the mayor's office. They've been very supportive. I keep asking for a little bit more additional help. Right now we're at 81 sworn in the city of Fitchburg. When I came on, we were less than that, but then in the mid-90s we had reached a point where we were pushing 95, 96 police officers. Because of the unforeseen circumstances, whether long-term illness or, you know, just a whole host of things, your fluctuation in your manpower constantly go up and down. So I'd like to get to a point where I can ride those waves of fluctuation and always continue to put out a product that is productive to the city. And in my vision, that is through engagement opportunities, a very robust school resource officer program, which we do have and I'm very proud of, a very robust engagement program. We're still going to respond to calls for service. We're still going to respond to accidents. God knows we respond to speeding cars throughout the city. Those tasks we're going to continue to address. But, you know, I would hope that I can get the department to a point where we can sustain the waves of having employees available through, you know, have enough numbers that we can get through those waves when our numbers are down.
Well, Chief, I appreciate your time today. You're a busy man. Thanks for coming and having this conversation, and thank you for your nearly 35 years of service to the city. But I am going to nail you down to a score here. So how many points is Fitchburg going to score in the Thanksgiving game?
Well, one of my police officers, James McCall, is a coach.
That's right.
And if you come to my office, I display the Red Raider jerseys, the helmets. My office is a shrine to the Red Raiders. 28-14 Fitchburg.
28-14. All right, you heard it here first. That's our show. See you next month, everybody.
Thank you.